The euro is going to be rolled out in a chaotic way, and will fail, so we're facing a massive crash. That's what Alice Weidel from the AfD says, who could potentially be the new chancellor. She also talks in a highly explosive interview now with Marc Friedrich about why she owns Bitcoin. We're seeing more and more people at the political level who also own Bitcoin. Here we look at the best and most explosive statements from the interview, because there were some very, very spectacular statements here. Alice Weidel also points out that here we have to control. Theft is that people are currently being systematically exploited by the state. Think about it a sec. Here, politicians are talking about how taxes are robbery, what Bitcoin has been saying for a very, very long time. It's also being discussed that the euro construct can't work. I mean, folks, those of you watching this channel, they've known for a long, long time that this obviously can't work. And we have a ticking time bomb here. But this ticking time bomb is now also being brought into the mainstream. They're really doing some excellent educational work here. Here, people are really being shown the truth. How things are looking for the euro. Don't think, yes, everything is safe and put your money in a savings account, and then everything just runs smoothly. No, and no, 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 no. We have so many red flags in the euro these days. And we can see that purchasing power is constantly decreasing. If we're saving in euros, we're massive losers. On the other hand, if we save in Bitcoin, we're the massive winners. And this is what's being discussed in the political arena right now. Is laid out on the table. And that is of course brutal, because if the euro fails, it will of course be an additional boost for Bitcoin, although of course I can't conjure up a euro crash or anything like that here, because no one knows when this thing is going to collapse. Even Alice Weidel is talking about it, that it's basically set up to fail here. But you can't really make any predictions here, like saying the euro is going to fail in 2 years, 3 years, or something like that. That's always really, really difficult to determine in the end. All we can really say is that the euro is a construct, which is mathematically designed so that it must break, that it basically has to crash into the wall. We're basically on a Titanic that's just waiting to sink, and you can use the lifeboats now. They have already been released. You can just get into Bitcoin and drive off, no problem at all, but hey, check it out here, the highly explosive statements made by Alice Weidel to Marc Friedrich. I'll also put the link below for the full interview. Absolutely worth watching. Definitely check it out with Marc Friedrich. Also, make sure to subscribe. Dive in.
What are the three main problems that Germany is facing you would address, besides migration policy?
Energy policy, because energy is the backbone of the economy, but also the regulatory framework.
Would you exit the euro?
Believe that they can no longer exit the euro.
What?
This is going to lead to a chaotic unwinding of the euro.
So that was put very diplomatically. A chaotic exit from the euro just means here. The euro is crashing, hyperinflating, there's going to be a currency cut. Whatever. For sure, this thing is going into a nosedive.
I think we can agree on that. You're also economist and have written many books about it. By the way, I've read them. Thanks. Can I? I can only recommend it. But the euro, where will it go? Long, perhaps. It won't exist longer. It will eventually collapse, to go into a chaotic unwinding. And it's absolutely right how you say it. That's going to get really expensive. One should have exited, and in the right order. The exit was always discussed. Greece is being discussed. But it should have been done other way around. There are such procedures. But in such a case, yes, we had a situation in the crisis where the euro rescue policy started in violation of the treaty, also illegally. That the strong currency countries should have exited first, with Germany leading the way. That's obviously a political demand. That would never be enforceable. No one understands. Exactly, because people have let's just say, they have a basic education in economics but understand very little about currency. I've also dealt with state financial crises and banking crises during my studies. I'm a currency economist, and accordingly, I can just say, this euro construct is not going to work.
Yeah, it's already not working. They changed the rules of the game, broke the laws from the highest level. That's a shame, it's wrong.
So what Alice Weidel is saying here, fiat currencies are shitcoins, but the euro is basically the shitcoin on steroids, because the euro has the added problem that it's not just a fiat currency that's already doomed to fail. I mean, the dollar is going to crash too, but here the euro has the extra issue that it combines different economic areas into one currency, and these different economic areas are of course also different. Strong ones. We have very, very strong countries like Germany, for example, or whatever. But we also have weak countries like, I don't know, Greece and places like that. And they all have exactly the same currency. And now there's the problem, what if one country just skyrockets? Here there's economic growth and so on. And other countries are economically very, very weak, so normally there should be a disparity here. In terms of purchasing power, weaker countries might have a weaker currency, which could make it easier for them to export goods. Stronger countries might then become more like import nations, which could have stronger currencies. That means there are different options here that you can then play around with, where you can also consciously use central bank policy to either appreciate or depreciate their currency. For example, there are actually countries like Switzerland that have more of the opposite problem. The currency is too strong. They need to devalue the currency here to not become too strong compared to the other fiat currencies. And when you have a currency area like this, a currency union, we actually have a debt union now. Then you have the problem that you no longer have that flexibility. The euro is basically just as much an ideological project as the green transition and all that stuff. What all of that ultimately entails, where is discussed here in the interview, that we have an energy problem in Germany. And if we obviously have an energy problem, then sooner or later we're also going to have an inflation problem. That also affects the currency, again, and so on. It's all somewhat connected. And here, the construction is basically like this. Doomed to fail. That it can never really be done right again. It might have still been possible to change all of this. Maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe they could have pulled the emergency brake back then. But then they didn't decide to exit, to do a Dexit. They basically decided to just keep going here. Now you're basically stuck in a trap where you can't really get out from the problem because it exists, the issue of the days 2 problem. Then there's basically the issue of the debt union. That means that if, for example, Greece goes bankrupt, then Germany is liable for it because Germany is just as trapped in the euro. Then, there are now other countries that are basically living at Germany's expense. Because there's basically a debt union here and Germany can't really afford it. That Greece goes bankrupt here, because otherwise Germany is basically liable for the debts or for the bankruptcy or collapse of Greece, and has to chip in. So Germany is basically the pack mule here, carrying all the weaker countries along. That means it's basically a kind of redistribution machine that's happening here, instead of having a Germany first policy here. Do you want to drag some people along with rescue? And the problem is, people are basically living beyond their means. They're less disciplined. In Germany, the debt situation is still somewhat manageable, okay? And then you have countries like France. They're really going all out. And France is really shaking in its boots. And if France falls, then that's the probability that Germany or other countries will be dragged down. Very, very high. And that's basically the perverse thing about the construct that's currently happening here. But there is now a solution. And Alice Weidel seems to have understood the solution. She seems to have gotten it. That one needs to prepare here in the form of Bitcoin. We also know by now that many bank accounts associated with the AfD are being frozen, and so on. Bitcoin is a censorship-free currency. And Alice Weidel actually said on Maischberger that she owns Bitcoin. Marc Friedrich is now digging deeper, which he has done very well. Ask him very specifically, hey, why do you have Bitcoin? What's that all about? And now take a look at the answer.
I was glad to hear on Maischberger that she owns Bitcoin. That means they apparently understood the money system. How did you get into Bitcoin?
I bought Bitcoin a few years ago, but then I was literally canceled by a provider. Then I eventually got back into it.
So, they're not really going into detail about Bitcoin here. Alice Weidel basically just says that she bought Bitcoin years ago. That means she must have been aware of this for a long time, because she probably has known for a long time. That's not really news, or that the euro is going to fail or something like that. A lot of people have known this, and that's why it's so twisted. People are still here, leaving large amounts of money just sitting in a euro account or something like that. So, of course, better here, dump the cash into Bitcoin. I'll also put a link down below to 21 Bitcoin, how you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin here. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin here. So that's a strong recommendation from me. Alice Weidel basically says, okay, she was canceled here some time ago. So you can basically speculate on that you were registered on an exchange that eventually went bankrupt. That went bankrupt. For example, there were things like Nuri or I don't know what else was out there. Or it could be that she only had some kind of derivatives or something like that. Not really any Bitcoin at all. Then something definitely went wrong. I don't know, that's tough. To figure this out, you really would have to talk to her in more detail. Some people have already said I should do an interview with her. So, if there's a chance, then absolutely yes. Definitely hit the like button if I should do an interview with Alice Weidel. hear about Bitcoin where you can really dive deep, where you can really take a look. Okay, what's the current level of knowledge here? Because the AFD has also opened up to Bitcoin here. The AFD, I'd say, doesn't go as far as the FDP, where they say they want to create a crypto reserve or something like that. But the AFD definitely says, hey, Bitcoin is tolerated. And there are a lot of people in the AFD. Now, like Alice Weidel, who apparently also has Bitcoin. She also had the other Bitcoins. One person gave a speech in the Bundestag, another has IM. Where was that? In the European Parliament, someone else gave a speech. So, it seems like there's already a certain presence of Bitcoin here. In the party, which is, I'd say, interesting, but in the end, it's also the logical consequence here. Because Alice Weidel has Bitcoin simply because she understands the monetary system. So, like Marc Friedrich says, that means if you understand the monetary system, you naturally come to Bitcoin. Because you just notice, fiat currencies are doomed to fail. The euro is basically the worst fiat construction you could possibly imagine. And then there are things like gold, which are pretty okay. But you will if you own gold. Still, in relation to Bitcoin, you'll basically end up getting poorer because Bitcoin just has a much better risk-reward ratio. Basically, Bitcoin has a much higher upside and potential. Gold is still okay. You can still have it as a mix if you want to diversify here, or something like that. But Bitcoin is definitely the strongest horse in the stable. And it seems like politics or big players are getting this now too. Big personalities are starting to get it more and more, because they obviously have a certain amount of wealth that they need to protect, that they basically need to protect here. And Bitcoin is really the optimal protection against an overreaching state, especially when you're also being censored at times, just like the AFD here. Alice touches on that in the interview, by the way. One, that the AFD is cancelled here. And then, of course, Bitcoin is also a censorship-resistant protection. Basically, it's a safeguard against the state's overreach here. And in the next part, it continues to address how the state is overreaching. You're being systematically robbed of money. That means you're not just being robbed through taxes, but also through inflation. And that's something that very, very few people understand. Many people still worship the state as a holy state. Well, please do my taxes. Because then you could build really great roads and do all sorts of amazing things, but guess what? The state doesn't use your money to actually make anything efficient out of it. Of course he does useful things, but the problem is you have to give the state €5 somehow so that there is €1. Somehow, it just doesn't lead to a productive or efficient investment. And the other €4 just kind of disappear somewhere in the bureaucracy. And with the other money, that's where Annalena Baerbock comes in. Any hairstyle or Olaf Scholz will fly somewhere around the world and meet you on the other side. Yeah, you need to pay attention to the climate and all that. That means, in the end, that is the inefficiency that you are supporting and where you are essentially enslaving yourself. Let it. But hey, listen to what Alice Weidel has to say about this.
And that's something why the people, especially in the US, they voted the way they did. That didn't do anything for Hollywood either. And that's absolutely right. People are really very fed up. They want normal politics to improve their living conditions. Young people want to start families. They want to save up. They want to build wealth. They don't want to give all their hard-earned money to the government. Maybe giving it up, that's just robbery. Yeah, that's just robbery, what the government does with taxes, and they don't even provide any decent services in return. You can really see that here, especially in Germany. And accordingly, I believe that what's been slipping here, you can really see that in the fundamental data from Germany. A change in politics.
So, some really intense statements here from Alice Weidel. Feel free to write in the comments below what you think. It's great that politicians, such big personalities, are speaking out openly. That the euro is going to fail here, that you might even own Bitcoin and maybe see Bitcoin as a plan B. And now, here's a big recommendation. I just had Joe Mark here, and we actually played Bitcoin Uno. There's actually a brand new card game called 21. And that's a really big recommendation. We just played for about an hour or so. In the end, it's all about the fact that it's exactly the same game as Uno. And the one who wins is the one who has no fiat debt anymore. That means there are a lot of currencies here. Like, for example, here you have yuan or you have euro, dollar, a whole bunch of different currencies. Of course, there's also the Bitcoin card here. The Bitcoin card, that's definitely the best card, and you should definitely hodl it. That means if you're about to win here, you don't say Uno, you say this. Hodl. Just before you're about to win. So, in the end, it's a Uno Uno frog, which is absolutely awesome, especially for the orange pill effect, which makes everyone happy. Who hasn't been on board to Bitcoin yet? You can orange pill. That's a recommendation. I'll put a link down below so you can check it out. It also only costs like 9.99 euros, and if you use the code Bitcoin Hotel, there is. In the Copiaro shop, there's also another discount. I don't know how much, but I think there's also another discount. Let me know what you think about Alice Weidel's massive statements. See you soon. See you later. Peace out.